It's always a pleasure to welcome Beth Sanner to the Cipher Brief studio. Beth, of course, is a former deputy director for national intelligence at ODNI. She worked as President Trump's intelligence briefer, and she has since worked as an analyst on national security issues. Beth, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Suzanne. It's good to see you.
You know, I think you spend an awful lot of your time, Beth, focused on intelligence operations and pulling them apart. Given what we've just seen happen with Israel and these strikes in Iran that took out, by some estimates, 20 senior leaders of Iran's nuclear program. I mean, it's astonishing if you think about the titles of some of these folks and their staffs. I just wanted to talk to you about the level of intelligence operation that we're seeing here. Is this something unusual?
This is pretty amazing. And it shows you just how sophisticated Israel is and how countries like Israel, they work in a way that, we don't always, because number one, they're at war and they feel that they have an existential threat. And because they don't have things like our mother of all bombs, right? So they have to work on an asymmetric level, I think similar to Ukraine. Not that Iran is more powerful than they are, but they don't have the powers that the United States has. And so they have to go about these operations really using a combination of covert intelligence plus hard military force. And they integrate these things in a way that I think is just so effective and impressive. And in small countries where you don't have, a ton of people, you're all really focused on a target. When you're focused on that target, you can make a lot of great things happen.
There are some indicators that this is an intelligence operation that took years to plan. And then carried out, obviously, in a very quick timeline. But just the level of intelligence they would need from an outsider, you need to know who everyone is who's involved at different levels of the operation. You need to know where they live. You need to know where they're going to be at any given point in time. Break that down for me, just how complex the operation was.
Right. So obviously, Israel's using lots of means of collection here. Mm-hmm. So they had Mossad operatives on the ground. They probably have a network of human assets who know, I don't know that, but, the attack when they took out the head of Hamas in that IRGC safe house in Tehran last year, that was another indication that they had deep penetration of IRGC itself. And I think that they have to have some kind of human assets as well as signals collection, overhead, and actually their own people on the ground. And that's the kind of audacity that, really we're only seeing with these countries that are trying to do this. Ukraine is the other example. So it's very impressive, and they put people in harm's way. They were planning it for years. And Suzanne, it kind of makes me think this is part of the reason why Israel saw this window opening right now, and they had to do this because the window was going to close, either because there was going to be an agreement with the United States, or something else with Iran building up their air defenses again. And they were really well positioned to know kind of where Iran was and what they needed to do. And they weren't going to let this operation go to waste after all this planning, because for them it is existential.
Yeah, and it's not the first sort of amazing operation we've seen this year either. There was the operation earlier this year where they leveraged the supply chain, maybe is a nice way to put it, and it got into the pagers for members of Hezbollah and exploded the pagers. I mean, it feels like, and then we've seen the Ukrainian operation, Spiderweb, of course, which you mentioned, in Russia, where they had incredible ingenuity and creativity in hiding drones in wooden cabins or houses or whatever you want to call them, and flipped a remote control that rolled back the roof. The drones came out. Beth, it just feels like we're moving into an era of like, you can't make this stuff up. It's almost like a Mission Impossible Hollywood version. Do you feel like the world has gotten so complicated that like the creativity component is one of the most important things that the intelligence agencies have now?
Creativity and strategic patience.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, this probably doesn't work so well in an authoritarian system where the great leader's breathing down your neck for an operation that has to be done tomorrow. These things take time and really careful planning and absolute operational control over communications to make sure that this kind of thing doesn't leak out. I mean, you think about how long this has been going on and how many people would have to be involved. And we all had strategic surprise here, or at least tactical surprise. Like, I didn't think this was going to happen until after the Witkoff meeting in Oman on Sunday. Denial and deception by the Israeli services was a primary part of this campaign, was to fool everybody and think it was going to happen. Maybe it would happen, but it wasn't going to happen for another few days. And so that was a really important part of, I think, the planning of this. When you look at the Ukraine situation and this, the other thing I think that we all have to worry about is that the ability of, these are very sophisticated governments and services who are doing these operations, but it wouldn't take a lot for any terrorist organization or even an individual to apply drone technology now against soft targets. And that, that's kind of what I'm worried about, is that, remember, it was only less than a year ago, we were all worried about drones flying over our cities and Air Force bases. My guess is that that really hasn't stopped. It may not be in the news, but, we have some real problems with our own defenses, and Iran is easier to penetrate than the United States, but it doesn't take this kind of level of operation to cause damage. So I think that that's what you're raising here, is that we're in a whole new world here of using these kinds of small, cheap systems for really significant results, but they could also be used to terrorize on a much smaller scale.
What does all of this, Beth, tell you when you combine the importance of human intelligence and, excuse me, old-fashioned spies and the quality of information they're able to collect, and you marry that with the technology, as you mentioned, of drones? It makes counterintelligence, I would think, much, much harder. What does it tell you about the future of intelligence?
I think that our human operators should, are probably rejoicing, because they're like, yes, we can't be replaced by a machine, right? This isn't, you are applying in this case, several multiple levels where they are using autonomous systems. They are using AI to manipulate and to run those systems remotely, but they also had operatives on the ground. They also had networks of individuals. And so it's kind of a combination of, people talk about this now, I think more and more, is that it's not who is ahead on AI, it's how do you combine these high-tech systems with the rest of your tools and your suite of tools in a networked fashion and in a battlefield context. And it's the integration of these things that matters, and that's what's going to set adversaries and us, who wins that networked, integrated systems approach is the one who will be superior.
Yeah. What are your 5 key takeaways from this particular operation, Beth? 5 may be too many. I don't know. You did. It
5?
is
Oh
stunning.
my gosh.
3 might be enough.
You're putting me on the spot here. 5 takeaways. One takeaway is that I think we really don't know yet where this is all going to go.
Yeah.
Israel is showing, amazing audacity as usual in daring and skill in these kinds of operations. But an air campaign, even supplemented by sabotage, is not a strategy. And where is this going? Do we understand what the goal is, let alone what the day after is supposed to look like? So that's one thing, is like, maybe this is just about the nuclear, but they're taking out a lot of people. And is it about regime change? I don't know. The second thing is that the United States is going to have some decisions to make about what they're going to do, what, our government is going to do about Iran's nuclear program at this point. Because even with all of the capabilities that Israel's bringing to bear, I don't think that they can completely destroy Iran's nuclear program. So is the United States going to join in at some point and use our heavy bombs, this mother of all bombs, the GBU bomb? And lastly, I think, really strategically, what does this mean for the entire region? And it could be that in the end, this actually achieves remarkable things in terms of creating the situation where Iran is really no longer a threat in the region. That would be amazing. But we could also have a circumstance where the hardliners actually take over in the next phase of what happens with Iran. And we don't know. So we have some really big questions out there about where this is going. And I don't even think that the people who started this have any idea about those answers.
Which just tells you how incredibly complicated all of this is. Beth Sanner, thank you so much for joining us here in the Cipher Brief studio. Beth is former Deputy Director for National Intelligence at ODNI and one of our favorites here at the Cipher Brief. Thank you, Beth.
Thanks, Suzanne. See ya.